Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining this week's episode of From the Field, Farm Chat with Idaho Wheat. We are privileged to have Dustin and Jennifer Young on with us today from Idaho Grain Inspection Services. And Dustin and Jennifer, just to start out with, if you could both just give us a brief introduction of yourselves, a little bit about IGIS, when it was started, and how long the both of you have been
there. Okay, first I'm Dustin Young. My wife and I, Jennifer, owned the Idaho Grain Inspection for the past 5 years. We bought it from the previous owner, Jim Simpson, who I worked for since 1996. The Idaho Grain Inspection was combined with the Utah Grain Inspection. They're called the Utah-Idaho Grain Exchange back in the 80s. So it's been around a long time. When Utah was unable to continue, the state bought them out, and so they're a state-run agency. Idaho was bought out in as a private agency and was run that way ever since. Ed Matchey, I believe, was the previous owner before Jim Simpson. Anyway, we're an official service provider.
Which means we hold the federal designation for the state of Idaho. So we're privately owned but federally regulated.
And so we've have to go through some pretty stringent check testing and overview on us to maintain that licensing or that designation. They only allow one designation per area, and we are the designated area for the lower half of the state of Idaho. So we can put an official certificate on things and get a backing in a court that would stand up in court as the official system if there's any questions or things like that occur. It is, like I say, we have to do different check tests twice a year. On our protein machine, it's every day. We do things to keep up on it, and it goes into the federal system to make sure that they see that we're doing everything that we are supposed to. So it's a check and balance kind of way, and in that process, it protects the farmer and the elevators both. And that's why it's so important is you got to have a third party, non-biased, to make sure that the farmer's getting the best grade and the elevator's getting the best grade, and there's no conflict of interest there and no bias involved.
Is there a difference between Idaho Grain Inspection Service and Federal Grain Inspection Service?
No. So with the licensing that we have, again, it's called the official service provider. We are just an extension of the federal grain inspection. If we maintain that designation and that licensing.
So they actually come out and do an audit. They go through our business, our files, they talk with our customers, they make sure that we've kept records, that we're doing all the tests that we need to do to make sure that we can maintain that designation, so that we're just another arm of that federal system, that we are picking the same lines, we're giving the same results, our machines are operating in the same tolerances.
And Jennifer, how often are you audited by the federal?
So it used to be that they came out and visited us every 3 years. And the last time they came out, we did so well on our audit, they extended us to 5 years. So we have them come visit us every 5 years. And this is our lucky year. We're looking forward to them coming out and going through things and wanting to visit with our customers this year sometime. So, and we don't know when that is. They will just come and want to see everything when they come.
Right. Okay. Before we keep going, I just want to invite anybody participating today. If you have a question, just chime in and let us know your question, or if you want to put it in the chat. I will also monitor the chat and get that question asked and answered by the Youngs today. Dustin and Jennifer, why should a farmer have their grain tested by Idaho Grain Inspection Services if it's not for export?
Well, the good thing about knowing what's in your bins, you have so many different options and different places to go with it. If you have room to store it on your own property and that, you store it in your bin, you get it checked, tested, or tested, and it allows you to have options. Say a guy over here's offering it for this protein, or a guy over here's offering it for a little lower protein. You know what you have, and you can go different directions with it if you have the option of different pricing. And it's always smarter to know what you have in a bin. If you're taking some other elevator's opinion, or some private contractor or something that's coming in and telling you what they have because they want to buy it from you, I mean, how often is that good in this world we live in today? So it's always good. For the more knowledge that we have, the easier it is for us to do the best we can with what we have.
So, Ryan, if you don't mind, let me jump into a question here.
Yep.
Could you explain a little more about what types of tests you're running? What kind of laboratory setup you have for confirming grain quality, and what kind of turnaround time, et cetera, you have on some of the tests?
Absolutely. So we do everything from moisture, test weight, dockage, shrunken and broken, proteins, and then we also run falling numbers, vomitoxins, and we do different types of grains too. We do the wheat, barley, oats, rye, triticale, corn, canola, and we've done some of the non-standardized grains, which is your safflower, your mustard. We've done those also.
They're also picking for damages. So if you have mold or sprout, if you have germination issues, things like that, they're looking for that as well in a sample to let you know what you have.
Are all of these tests, or all of these part of the I'm not sure how to say it, part of the grain standards, or are some of these supplemental to the grain standards?
So the requests come upon what you guys need.
Yeah.
So whatever the market needs in it and where you're going with it. Most of those are standard. So you do a moisture, a test weight, a dockage, damages, shrunken and broken, IDK, anything like that, infestation, smut. That's all comes with the actual standards of the grade itself. The falling numbers, the VOM, are upon request. But if we see a sample that has Fusarium head blight in it, we automatically call the customer up and say, hey, do you want us to run a VOM on this? Because you may have an issue. And then it allows them to know if they need to go to feed with it, or to go to if it's still good enough to go to food consumption for human consumption.
And then you asked about turnaround. Depending on what time of the day you get it to us, we are doing our best to have you back to you either that day or the next morning. So within 24 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're doing wet chemistry tests as well, not just on functional soundness and dockage, et cetera.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You're doing some wet chemistry tests as well then?
Yeah, like the falling numbers and the vomitoxins. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And
yes.
And for the smuts, you can identify which types of smuts, et cetera?
Well, so there's a certain smut that comes in wheat.
Yes.
And it's usually more prevalent in a wet spring. Right. Especially if the seed hasn't been treated in that, or if the winter wheat's had like the winter we've had with a lot of snow on it. Right. So those come and they're just smut balls, and they come in the sample and that, and then we can grade it as such.
So it's a visual common bunt type of estimate.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sure.
Yep. Yeah, but so all those things, and then obviously different grains require different testing.
Sure.
When we do the barley, it includes malt factors and things like that, and so we're able to, and the only reason we're able to do those is because we are licensed. You get people out there, and there are some certain private inspections and that are out there, but to have the official system, you know that things are being check tested and people are doing and following the guidelines to the T, or else we're off when they call up a sample and they say, hey, we want to see this sample, and they get our sample and we're completely off, then they have to correct us. And so it keeps us online with all the quality and standards that we may be doing.
And I'm assuming the standards and tests don't change very often. I mean, this is something that's pretty much been in place for decades, as I understand, right?
Back since 46, a lot of it.
Right.
But they meet the market and the public is what changes it. We can't change it. So when things change, it's because you guys out there and the elevators and the flour mills and that said, hey, we want to see a difference here, see something change here. And so they bring that to the federal system and GIPSA and get things changed that way. And then they tell us, hey, you got to start doing it this way.
Right. Do you ever receive requests for tests that either you don't do or are out of range of what the federal standards need?
Oh, we see things all the time that we have to sample grade or turn back or whatever. But as far as the testing of things that we can't grade, we've seen one or two things in this area. Like we got a sample of sunflower seeds the other day, and nobody's licensed here to do sunflowers, so we had to tell them that they need to go to a different agency or back to North Dakota to get it tested.
I guess one clarification, I mean, the grain inspection is very different than the seed certification and seed inspection arena, right? You don't do a bit of both.
Now we do germinations, but they're unofficial.
Okay.
Just to give the farmer a quick guesstimate on where he could see the germ coming in at.
And that test takes between 48 and 72 hours. It's not next day. It takes a little bit longer for that germination test to happen.
Sure.
Yeah, so there are some things that we do that aren't official, but we do them for the convenience of the customer coming in.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. What do you see right now as the biggest concerns? And I mean, every year is a little bit different. What problems you're going to see, contaminations, what kind of soundness issues there might be, late harvest, falling numbers are another issue. What do you anticipate things coming forward, or is it kind of you wait and see what's coming through? You know what to expect?
So I'm a little concerned with the winter kill that we've had.
Yes.
It's been pretty widespread. I'm a little concerned about what they've planted back into that field. If it's going to be a spring winter mix, soft white, it won't matter. So if you planted winter soft white, spring soft white, it's going to be all soft white. But if you planted hard red spring in a hard red winter field and you get some volunteer winter popping up, it may be a problem, may be an issue. And then I'm also concerned that long as that snow stood on those fields, a little concerned about smut this year. And we know that vomitoxin does better on wet springs, and we've had a pretty wet spring.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. I think you are going to see some different problems this year. Yeah, and that issue of hard red spring replanted or trying to fill in the hard red winter. I mean, you can't default back to just hard red winter, right? That becomes a mixed grain issue.
Yes.
And that's a kind of a visual call. That's always a little bit more difficult to deal with as well, isn't it?
It is, especially where we are such a diverse growing area.
Yeah.
We have the highs and low elevations. We have the irrigated and the dry farms. I mean, it can create a different look on the same seed. And so, yeah, it is a difficult, but we do our best on keeping an updated library in our office on the different varieties that are grown in the state of Idaho.
Yeah.
And then we can always refer back if the customer comes in and says, hey, this was the variety of it. We can go back and look at that and see if it has the characteristics of that kernel. If he disagrees with what the grade comes out.
That always amazed me as how good the inspection people are at taking a look at a grain sample and saying, this is the variety. You know, as a plant breeder who tried to make them more diverse and make them more difficult to characterize. I mean, the contacts I had in Olympia, I was always amazed with how good they were at picking out the varieties, the grains. I mean, that's a skill unto itself.
It takes a lot of years.
It does, absolutely. Well, that's going to be an interesting one. Do you hear feedback from the export side on what they're seeing or the concerns they're hearing in the marketplace? How does that feedback loop work?
The only thing we've heard so far is that our wheat's too expensive.
Really?
Yeah, and you tell a farmer that, and that's pretty unbelievable to hear when they're spending so much to grow it. But unfortunately, there's other countries out there that are supplying a lot cheaper product. Not as quality. I'd say Idaho is some of the best quality for soft white wheat that's grown anywhere. But yeah, so I other than that, I think that price has really kind of hurt our export market.
So question again, so as you put a grade on grain leaving the state, obviously a lot of that ends up commingled at the port or elsewhere. So it's going to be tested again in bulks and shipments, and I guess you lose a lot of the identity once it leaves the state, right?
You can, yes. If it transported and then it changes containers,
yeah,
you have to you should get it inspected again, because you never know, that next container may have had something in it. It may have sat on there a while. It may have got rained on. Who knows what happened from the previous container to that next container.
So every time it's repackaged or reblended or something, you're going to need someone to keep an eye on it.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, most of the time, I mean, we see trucks coming out of Idaho down into Ogden to the flour mills, and see trucks going up to Blackfoot into the flour mills and that, and then the rail cars that are loading up everywhere that are going different directions. Most of the time, we'll grade it coming into the elevators for the farmers' knowledge and the elevators' knowledge, and then we'll grade it again as they take it out and put it on a truck or a rail car, and that will be more of an official grade, though. We'll go out and probe those.
Okay. So what proportion of the samples would you be looking at would be for domestic use versus export?
Domestic is probably 90-something% of our
business
right now.
Especially right now.
This year,
really
yeah,
right now.
This year the export market kind of just
has been quiet.
Really quiet.
Oh, okay.
So we have seen a few cars going to Mexico and that. We did some containers this year that went abroad, and so we have seen some, but not near as much as we did the year before.
Sure.
Dustin, how long do you store your samples there at the facility?
So we're required to store them for a certain amount of time each, depending on if they're a submit or an official probe or an export probe. So our submitted probes or submitted samples that we get in, we store up to 3 to 5 days, 7 at the most. Our official probes where we go out and probe them, it's 7 to 10 days. And then our export stuff is usually about 60 days.
30 to 60 depending
30 to 60
on the
depending on where they're going.
Yeah.
Just in case there is a problem with it, the farmer has a chance to revert back and say, hey, can you send that sample off to the feds and get a second opinion? Or can you look at something? I feel like you didn't give a good test weight. We can always bring it back here and check it out again. Because there are some human errors that come into play with different things. And so we try to do our best to, if a farmer needs a recheck on it, to make sure that he's getting that recheck and that it's what it is.
And when we do an official sample and it comes back into our lab, we split it in half, and half of it doesn't get touched. It just gets put aside and saved, and the other half has all the tests run on it. So we actually have an original portion of the sample that hasn't had anything done to it. That's the part we save.
It's also so the feds can call them up. They'll call up random samples on us and check them to make sure that we're the same as them back there in Kansas City.
Yeah. Can you guys talk about the process of collecting and grading samples?
Yeah. So we during the harvest time, if it's just a submitted sample, we'll go around to elevators and just pick up different elevator samples who use us.
Or farmers that bring them in.
Farmers that bring them in. So there's different ways of submitting a submitted sample. I mean, they mail them in to us. We go pick them up at the elevators. We go clear over to Twin Falls area and pick up samples. Usually, generally, the ones in Boise usually mail them to us. And then farmers are bringing it in, depending on, they'll collect them all year and then bring them in at the end of harvest. And then we'll run.
Or if they're in the middle of a field and want to know what the moisture's like or the protein's like, they'll run a sample to us and say, could you run a quick test on this and let me know where I'm at?
Okay.
But as far as trucks, we have a stand out front here that we go up there and we hand probe the trucks.
Same with the rail car.
With the rail cars, we'll travel to the location of the rail car and
to the elevator.
To the elevators and probe those. We probe them a certain amount of time depending on how big the holding facility is or whatever, how big the container is. It has to have a certain amount of probes come from it. The submitted samples have to be at least 1,000 grams or 2.5 pounds, whereas the official sampling has to be twice that. So we, like Jennifer was saying, that we can split them
and hold that portion
and hold that other half.
Right.
So we and like I say, we've traveled clear over to Weiser to probe cars. We traveled to Nampa and then up to Ashton.
We go to Soda Springs. We've been down to Preston. So the southern half of the state of Idaho.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do have some farmers that live across the border into Utah that'll run their stuff up to us because it's more convenient. They can get the results back faster than running them down to the state office there in Ogden. So we do grade some of the wheat that's grown in Utah.
But where that's a different designation, we're not allowed to go there
We can't
and
go
probe
get
unless
it.
we get special permission from.
They bring it to us.
Yes. The same with Montana and Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Are there specific processes or requirements that you guys must follow to keep your federal certification or license from year to year? Absolutely.
Yeah. Where do you want me to start? It's actually quite a process. They've just opened our area up to redesignation or to reassignment or whatever. So most of the time the person or the agency that's there gets the benefit of the doubt, unless there's a lot of complaints from customers and stuff, and we're just not doing our job, then they'll bid it out there for somebody else to have. But so the process is that all of our machines have to be kept with the check test that I was talking about earlier. Scales, dockage machines, shrunken and broken, sieves,
All the equipment.
proteins, all that has to be maintained and check tested. Some of them are, like I say, are daily. Some of them are twice annual, and some are annually. Very few are annually though. And so we have to maintain that, and then we also have to maintain the ability to provide service and a good relationship, a good rapport with our customers. If we don't have enough people because we can't afford them or whatever, then that looks bad on our ability to provide. So all that has to be maintained also with the feds, and then their daily checks. If we're not licensed to do a grain, and you can't do it. If it's an official grain that has standards. If it's an unofficial standard grain or whatever, then we can do them and provide that service for them unofficially, but we can't put it on our official certificates and that.
And the inspectors are being checked on as well. The federal government will call up a sample by an individual inspector. They will have Dustin look at it and then package it up and ship it back to Kansas City so that they can grade it as well to make sure that the grade is being done properly. So as of right now, we have 6 inspectors, and they're all being checked on regularly to make sure that they're picking that correct line.
Yeah, I'm considered the QAS in our office, so I'll just check on each inspector. I'll put a thing in there saying I want to see more from this inspector because they may be struggling with DHVs or finding certain damage or whatever. So I'll put that in there, wanting them to provide that more than other inspectors that aren't having that problem. And then the feds will see that I checked somebody, and then they'll check on me to make sure I'm doing it right.
It's a lot of checks and balances.
And then they'll just randomly call up from other inspectors in the office and say, hey, we just want to see this sample and make sure it's correct. And that also checks our machines and things and stuff like that to make sure that they're not out of tolerance.
Can testing with IGIS increase profitability for farmers?
Oh, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. If you're going out there and you're just, like I say, if you're just going into an elevator and you're allowing that elevator to tell you what you have, I'd be very cautious. And not saying that they're doing it on purpose or trying to
short anyone.
To short anybody, but they have seasonal help. And when they have seasonal help, they're looking at it.
Is it red or white? That's about the difference.
Very brief knowledge or limited knowledge of an understanding of what you're bringing into them. And so anytime you bring a sample in for a couple of bucks, you're saving yourself maybe a lot of money at the end.
Yeah.
And so it could be very profitable. If this world was all trustworthy and you could just trust that everybody's doing the up and up, then I guess there'd be no need for us.
But even just knowing your protein contents and how to manage those grain sales on that'll go way beyond just paying for testing. That's an easy one. Knowing where to deliver, how to deliver, when to deliver, based on that's really important. So no, it's really appreciated. So I assume a lot of these growers have you on a speed dial or know where to find you.
We'd love to see more.
We have a few, but mostly over here in the southeast Idaho. We'd really like to get, and we're so grateful for the Idaho Wheat Commission for allowing us to provide this information out there so that people know and understand that we're here to help them and help them be profitable. Because it's like we tell everybody else that we can't be profitable unless the farmers out there are profitable and the elevators are profitable. It just doesn't work. And so we would like to put it out there. If farmers are around and they want to come in and see the place, they're welcome to stop by. We'll show them around. We'll kind of show them what we do.
We'd be happy to take their sample and show them exactly what we do to test it, to show them what they have in it, and let them watch the inspector actually go through it and show them, you know, what's great about what they've got.
No, I think that's great. And, you know, again, making more awareness out there for folks, so that is a very valuable service and something that they all ought to take advantage of. So I think that's a great idea. And Ryan, I'm sure can help do a little more PR along the way.
Well, they've been great so far, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just over the 30-minute mark, so I want to make sure if there's any other questions out there, or if you want to throw something in the chat. But just to reiterate, as we do with every From the Field, we will post this on all of our social media platforms. It'll go up on our YouTube channel. It'll be in our newsletter this week. And I'll also add some contact information for both you, Dustin and Jennifer, for farmers, anyone who wants to reach out and experience IGIS and see what you guys have to offer. So
Thank you.
we appreciate you so much taking your time to join us for our From the Field today. Thanks for joining, everybody, and hope you guys have a great week.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ryan.
Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate your questions.
Thank you both.